There are people that I take what they say as gospel truth. And then there are people that I don't believe anything that comes out of their mouth. You know what I'm saying? You got people in your life like that? You got people that you can trust what they say. They tell you something and it is good. Mindy's that way. My wife, Mindy, whatever she tells me, I believe. Like, it don't matter because she can tell me anything. And I would believe her first because never in my knowing her has she ever tried to deceive me. Has she ever tried to lie to me? Has she ever told me something that's like, I'm going to need a few other sources. Maybe you could cite some references. Can I Google this real quick to figure out whether you're telling me the truth? She tells me the truth. And so because of that, I believe what she says. She tells me stuff, I believe it, but not everybody's like that. There are people that I know that I don't really believe what they say. Like, they can say it, and I may smile at them, but it's like, they a lie. Why are they lying to me? That's what's going on in my head. When I was in high school, I worked retail. My first job where they took taxes out was I worked in retail and sold golf clothes actually in this store in Wolf Chase. And part of the transactional process you had to do at that time, a little different now, it hardly ever happens now, but at the time, if someone were to pay by card, credit or debit, they hand you a card. As the person working there, you also had to ask for their license. Yeah. Now, even though I was authorized by whomever authorizes such things to check people out with cards, I was never fully trained as to what I was supposed to look for with the license. I knew what to do with the card. You swipe it, It either goes through or it doesn't. I didn't really know what to do with the license. I didn't know if I'm supposed to take it and look at the picture and be like, does this picture look like this person? Let's see. I don't know. I don't know if I was supposed to memorize what the signature looked like so that way whenever they sign the receipt, I could be like, yes, that is their signature. I could tell. I don't know. But I decided on my own to do something that I thought was a much better indicator of truth. I decided when they handed me the license, I didn't worry about their name. I didn't worry about their picture. I just looked for where it said height and weight. Maybe you don't remember this about getting your license, or maybe it's been a minute since you got, but I have never been to a DMV where they stood me on a scale to figure out what my weight was. Or where they put a ruler up that says, stand up against the wall and let's see how tall you are. They just simply took my word for it, right? And everybody is thankful for that, But I learned so much about people because people would hand me their license and I would see their weight on there, but I'd been helping them for the last 20 minutes get clothes, and I knew something. Ain't no way on God's green earth they weigh 165 pounds. Like 165, not 165, 165, not 160, Or I see people and they it's like sometimes people that may be a little vertically challenged like to bump themselves up to 5'9". They won't go to 5'10" because that just seems like too much of a stretch. But they'll be 5'4", a solid 5'4", talking about they 5'9". It's like, please, and I just look. And look, and look, and look. And it told me everything I needed to know about whether I could trust this person. Everything I needed to know. Because I could take them at their word based on what they had put on here. Some of y'all are like, I wonder what my weight is on my license. I know, I kind of was wondering that too. Like when I was thinking about this, I was like, I wonder what my weight is. I haven't looked yet because I'm scared. But you got people in your life like that. I got friends that I love them. I love spending time with them. There's only one problem. I know they lying to me most of the time. Talk about what they did when they were, no, you didn't. Talk about no, you weren't. Like, they lying to me. And you got people like that too. You got people that as soon as they start speaking to you, like, they are not telling me the honest truth here. The interesting thing is not about the people. I ain't here to talk about that. I ain't here to judge you on what people you trust and don't trust, and maybe you should trust them more. That ain't what I'm talking about. But I do have one person I would like to draw your attention to and wonder if you trust what they say. And that would be God. Do you actually trust what God says? When God says something to you, about you, for you, over your life, when you read his word and what it says is true of you, do you trust what God says? Because if most of us were honest, the truth is that God can speak something plain and clear to you. There's only one big problem with what he's saying. You don't believe it. He says it, you just don't believe it. But you will never experience the restoration that's available to you, the restoring that God wants to do until you trust what he says. Let's go to the scripture together. We're gonna spend some time today in Luke chapter 5. And in Luke chapter 5, there is this powerful moment with Jesus and a man by the name of Simon, who, if you're sort of familiar with the New Testament or familiar with the story of Jesus and his followers, Simon has his name changed a little later on and he becomes known as Peter. But here he's Simon, because this is early in Jesus's ministry. This is version 1. We just getting started. Jesus actually, in this account that we're going to look at, it's the moment that he actually calls Simon Peter and says, Simon, it's time for you to come and follow me. But Jesus has a little ministry going. In fact, Luke chapter 3 or 4 kind of start to tell us about Jesus and some teaching and Jesus and some early miracles and a little bit of stuff going on. But this is when things really get rolling. And I want you to look at this with me, because your attention's going to go to the big things that happen here. But we're going to spend a moment looking at the small things that happen here too. Luke chapter 5, we're going to start in verse 1. These verses are in your notes. They're on the screen as well. They're also in the Bible. And it says it like this. It says, as the crowd was pressing in on Jesus to hear God's word, Jesus was teaching. There's a crowd gathered around. He was standing by Lake Gennesaret. He saw 2 boats at the edge of the lake. The fishermen had left them and they were washing their nets. So he got into one of the boats, which belonged to Simon, and he asked him to put out a little from the land. Then he sat down and was teaching the crowds from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into deep water and let down your nets for a catch. Master, Simon replied, we've worked hard all night and have not caught anything. I would love for you to underline these next 4 words. These next 4 words that Simon replies to Jesus. He says, but at your word. But at your word. Can I say it another way? Because you said so, I'll let down the nets. When they did this, they caught a great number of fish, and the nets began to tear. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat, come and help them. They came and filled both boats full so that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, go away from me, because I am a sinful man, Lord. For he and all those with him were amazed at the catch of fish they took. And so were James and John, Zebedee's sons, who were Simon's partners. Don't be afraid, Jesus told Simon. From now on, you will be catching people. They brought their boats to land, they left everything, and they followed him. I don't know if you've ever worked a blue-collar job overnight, but if you have, you'll understand how Simon felt. Because if you work a little blue-collar job and you're kind of overnight in this thing and you're working all night and doing this all night, there is a different kind of tired that hits you when you get done with your shift. When I was in college, I valeted cars, and valeting cars is blue collar work. I mean, it's just you running. You taking care of all these bougie people that want to just drive it to the door, and it is what it is. And the problem with where I worked is the accounts that I had, often you didn't get done until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. You were much closer to sunrise than you were to anything called sunset. And so you get done and you've been working for 8 or 10 or maybe even 12 hours at this thing, right? You've just been working. And you've been working and you're tired. You've been working and you're sweaty. You've been working and you're done. But it's weird because you are exhausted and wide awake at the same time. You know what I'm talking about? Some of you have no idea. You're like, I've never experienced that from the corner office. Okay, that's fine. Let me talk about been sweating with our work. I'm talking about work where when you go to work, like you go and you don't care how you look and you don't care how you smell because you know at the end of your work you're going to be sweaty and need a shower. That's what I'm talking about. And so me and some of my valet friends, we would meet up sometimes late at night, especially like Friday night into Saturday morning. And we would meet up at Taco Cabana or Whataburger, because they were open all night. And if you ever see a Whataburger, just stop and you can thank me later for eating there. But we'd go there because they were open all night. And the thing is, we'd sit together. We would be there. We'd have our taquitos in front of us. But we wouldn't say nothing. We just be there together. It's like we're awake and we're too tired to talk. And the last thing I want is for you to ask me to get you some salsa because you forgot to get salsa before you sat down. Like, don't ask me nothing. Let's just be here because I'm confused because I don't know if I should go to sleep or if I'll ever wake up again because it's 4:30 in the morning and I'm just tired and confused. Some of you have experienced that. And if you've experienced that, you know what Simon felt like this morning. Because at this morning in Luke 5, Jesus is teaching and he's preaching and he's got this big crowd gathering. But Simon is just getting done with his shift as a fisherman. Because in that part of the world, fishermen worked at night. Because what would happen at night is the fish would leave their hiding places and come up near the surface of the water to eat because it was cooler. And then during the day, the fish would vamp and they'd be gone down underneath these rocks and hiding. You couldn't catch no fish during the day. So professional fishermen worked all night. But Simon and his partners have not had a good night. And so Simon is over cleaning his nets. And this is really probably the last thing he has to do before he can go to the house, go to sleep, and not think about how unproductive, how unsuccessful this night of work was. There was probably some stress on Simon this morning. Because Simon was the provider for his family. And this fish would not have been only what he would have needed to eat so his family could eat, but it also would have been what he took to the market to be able to exchange and barter and work so that way he could get all the other things that his family would need. So Simon is exhausted, but awake, not wanting to be messed with, a little frustrated because he had a bad night at work. And if he's anything like me, probably just a little on edge with all this. And then Jesus comes by, jumps into his boat, and starts asking Simon for help. Now, it's very easy to overlook this when we read this because we don't understand what Jesus actually asked Simon to do. But when Jesus got in this boat, he asked Simon to put it out a little into the water. Because if you could picture it, there was an embankment going down into the water, like you see with most bodies of water. So Jesus was using the natural amphitheater that was created by the terrain there, but he needed this boat to be just a little bit off the shore. So that way, in full effect, people could hear him, all these people gathering around. And so when Jesus asked Simon to put it out a little bit into the water, he wasn't just asking Simon just to give the boat a little nudge and go back to cleaning your nets. He wasn't just asking Simon to push this out into the water a little bit and drop anchor because that technology had not been invented yet. He was actually asking Simon to do something. He was asking Simon to get in the boat, and Jesus is going to be on one end, sitting down in his teaching position, teaching the people, and Simon would be on the other side of the boat with his back to Jesus, having to navigate this boat and kind of keep it as still as possible so that Jesus could do his teaching ministry. Jesus was inviting Simon to come and help him in a very simple way, but a very significant way, at a time when for Simon, it would be very, very easy for Simon to say, Jesus, I'm tired. Jesus, James, why don't you go do this? Man, I'm tired. I got these nets to clean up. Man, I had the worst night at work. Jesus, I ain't got time for this. You can use the boat. Just make sure it's docked back in when I come back here in the night because I got to go fish tomorrow night because we did not have a productive night. Simon had every excuse in the world to tell Jesus, I can't do this. But what is so powerful and what I don't want you to miss is Jesus offered Simon the opportunity to help him in his teaching ministry. And even though Simon had every excuse in the world, he obeyed. He obeyed. Jesus made a request of Simon, and Simon obeyed. And that step of obedience, Simon, probably with his back to Jesus, navigating this little boat, making sure it doesn't move so much so Jesus doesn't get distracted by the fact that he's on a boat on water and Simon's trying to navigate it so he could use the amphitheater. He's navigating all this. Simon, his simple step of obedience here was the first step to him experiencing restoration. And some of us, the reason we don't experience restoration like we need to or should is because we are unwilling to obey in those simple things. Can I tell you something today? You better write this down. If obedience is beneath you, promotion is beyond you. If obedience is beneath you, I ain't got to obey that. I ain't got to do that. God don't want me to. If obedience is beneath you, promotion is beyond you. I think there are many people that miss opportunities that God wants to bring their way. They miss opportunities that God wants, doors he wants to open for you because you refuse to obey where it's simple. You refuse to obey in the little things. If Jesus just would have walked up to Simon and said, Simon, I would like you to preach this sermon. He'd be like, okay. But that's not what he got asked to first. He got asked to obey. Can you do what seems meaningless? Can you do what seems mundane? Can you do this as long as I need you to do this so that I can do what I need to do? If obedience is beneath you, promotion is beyond you. Everybody wants to be promoted. Everybody wants to be pushed forward, whether that's in your career, whether that's in your school, whether that's with your friends, whether that's in a neighborhood association, whatever sector of society, everybody wants to be promoted. Everybody wants to be used by God in bigger ways. People that follow God, I want to be used by God in bigger ways. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just need to understand that for some of you, the reason you haven't experienced the promotion you desire is because you've refused the obedience that's right in front of you. If obedience is beneath you, promotion is beyond you. You see, what proves that you can handle the more later is your obedience in the small right now. And Simon did it. Simon was obedient. He had every excuse in the world, but he was obedient. He had every opportunity to tell Jesus, I've just been a long night, been a little rough, all kinds of stuff going on. I'm going to have to pass on this one, but he didn't. And he didn't just do this. He did it as long as Jesus needed him to do it. Jesus didn't just ask him to do something and go back on with his work. Jesus asked him to get involved in his ministry in a low way, in a simple way. And Simon did. And he was faithful to it. And that moment in the beginning is what sparked what happened in the rest of this account. Right here with Simon, that was transformative for his life, that was restorative for his life. See, it's not just if obedience is beneath you, then promotion is beyond you, but you need to see this too. If faithfulness is beneath you, fruitfulness is beyond you. If you can make yourself faithful, God can make yourself fruitful. But he looks to us. He expects of you. He expects of me to make myself faithful to the thing that he's called us to do. And that's what's so remarkable about Simon. Simon faithfully does what Jesus asks him to do. He puts the boat out just a little bit into the water to help Jesus with Jesus' teaching ministry. And when Jesus is done, Simon probably thinks, all right, I can go back to cleaning these nets, I can get this boat docked, and I can get over to the house, and everything can be done for now, and I can forget about this night, this terrible night that I have had. But Jesus has more to say to Simon, doesn't he? He tells Simon, Simon, what I need you to do now is I want you to push this boat out into the deep water and let down your nets. Aren't those nets the very thing that Simon was cleaning to store for the night? You are going to create a bunch of work for me, Jesus. And so Simon replies to him, and we miss it sort of in English, but Simon replies to him. Scholars agree on this idea that Simon sort of replies initially with this sort of sarcastic tone to Jesus, where it's like, Jesus, I can understand you asking me to help with your little teaching ministry, but why don't you leave the fishing to us, Mr. Preacher Man? Like I am a professional fisherman. And if anybody is going to tell anybody how to fish and when to fish, it shall be I. That's what Simon says to Jesus. He's like, Master, this is the way we read it. But really, it's more of a slang term. It's like when you call somebody boss man and it's just what you call them. Like, it's not really any, it's just, what's up, chief? You know, like that kind of thing. He's like, listen, Jesus, Mr. Preacher, the sermon was great. I heard it. I didn't see it because my back was to you trying to balance this boat so you could talk to all the people. But it sounded great. But when it comes to fishing, you need to understand that we have fished all night and we didn't catch anything. And then Simon says the most remarkable thing. It's the thing I encourage you to underline. It's the thing that I hope that you circled. Simon says the most remarkable thing. And to be honest, scholars disagree as to why he said it and how he said it. Was Simon saying this thing that he says to Jesus, but at your word? Was he saying it in a sort of a, I'll show you, Mr. Jesus, like I can help you over here with this teaching thing, but I'm gonna show you. I'm going to show you there ain't no fish in this pond. We've been working all night, and they sure enough ain't going to be here during the day because they all hiding. I know, I'm a fisherman. Some people think it was sort of sarcastic. Most people think, though, that he offered it even if there was doubt in his mind, there was faith in his heart. And he had reason to have faith in his heart. See, this was not Jesus' first interaction with Simon. If you would have read Luke chapter 4, which maybe you know this, or maybe you just flip back a second ago. But at the end of Luke chapter 4, what we actually find is that Jesus goes to Simon's house because Simon's mother-in-law has this incredible fever, and Jesus actually comes, lays his hand on her, and she is healed. So Simon understands who is asking him to do something. So more than likely, there's some faith inside of him. Some faith that goes, look, I've seen this man heal my mother-in-law, and while I'm grateful for that, at your word, I'll do it. At your word, I'll do it. And somehow he finds enough faith, even when he's tired. He finds enough faith, even when he could make every excuse in the world. He finds enough faith to do the thing that Jesus is asking him to do, even though it don't make no sense. We could take a huge lesson from Simon. Because many of us, when God asks us to do something that doesn't make sense to us, we try to lean into God with a lecture rather than listen. But we need to start listening to God and stop lecturing God. We need to start listening to what God says do. Listening to what God says, when God says it, to do what God says, when God says it, because restoration always follows obedience. When I do what God says, then I can experience restoration. We need to start listening to God instead of lecturing God. See, Simon could have just sat there and just gone in reason after reason. He could have talked about the science of fishing with Jesus and taught him, Jesus, I don't know if you studied this in your carpentry school, your little seminary that you went to, because now you're Mr. Rabbi, prophet man. But like the way the fish work around here is the fish come up at night, and that's the time when you go. There ain't nobody gonna catch no fish during the day. But he didn't lecture God. He didn't lecture. He replied in faith. At your word, I will. Can I say it another way? What Simon looked at Jesus and said, I'll do it because you said so. It don't make sense to me, but because you said so, I will. Because you said so, I will. Because you said so, I'm going to try again. And I came to tell somebody today that I believe that is the statement that the Holy Spirit wants to tattoo on the inside of your soul this morning. That at his word, you will try again. At his word, you will try again. Some of you have given God reason after reason, excuse after excuse, and they're valuable. They're fine. It's good. It makes logical sense. But something on the inside of you today is going to say, at your word, I'm about to try again. I tried to be a friend to them. I tried to be the friend that I wish I always had. But when I tried it, I got let down. So that's why I isolate myself. And that's why I spend time. It is just me, and I don't want to talk to nobody. I'm going to be mean to. But at your word, I'm going to try again. I tried to love people. But every time I loved people, I felt like if I gave them long enough, they stabbed me in the back. But at your word, I'm going to love people again. I tried to serve, but I served and I got so tired because I lost focus as to why I was serving. And so then I decided it was serving that was the problem, but really it's me that's the problem. But at your word, I'm going to try again. I've put my resume out there for weeks and months and years, and it seems like ain't nobody want me, so I think I just have to do this, and this is going to be my lot in life. But at your word, I'm going to try again. At your word, I'm going to try again. Because you say so, God, I'm going to try again. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to live defeated. I'm not going to live like this is it because this is what's happened. At your word, I will try again. That's what Simon does. Jesus tells him to go do something that seems ridiculous. It don't make no sense why fishermen, educated, trained fishermen, would be out there when it's hot up in this desert, dropping their nets. But somehow Simon finds enough faith to say, at your word, I'm going to try again. And there's this miraculous thing that happens, and I don't think you saw it. I don't think you saw it. Because the miracle that happens is actually bigger than the boats going out into the water, pulling in fish so much that the first boat starts to sink, so the second boat comes, and then it starts to sink, and both these boats is overloaded with fish. There's something more miraculous that happens. It isn't just the fact that Simon, who was probably a little questioning Jesus, turns and then bows before Jesus and says, I'm not worthy to be around you. It's even more miraculous than just the simple fact that Jesus says, Simon, why don't you come and follow me? I'm going to make you a fisher of men. See, Jesus didn't just restore the night's work. He didn't just make it so Simon could go home with his chest out and be like, yeah, we had a good night tonight, baby. You know, we ain't eating fish, we eating steak over here. You know, like it wasn't just that. Jesus actually restored the dream that had always been inside of Simon. A little history, real quick. Every Jewish boy in that day studied and worked and prayed and hoped that their schooling while they were young, their memorization while they were young, their doing all the right things at the right time while they were young would offer them the opportunity to be picked by a rabbi. Picked. That a rabbi, a religious leader, would say to them, come follow me. Because then that would set that young boy on a trajectory to maybe one day be a scribe, maybe one day be a Pharisee or a Sadducee, but it would enable them to be a part of the religious life and the political life of things. And they hoped. That's why they memorized like they memorized. That is why they studied like they studied. The only reason you weren't on that trajectory was because nobody picked you. The only reason anybody would get to a point where they are a fisherman is they had tried the best that they could and nobody wanted them. So now you have to go to the family business. Now you have to just do what you got to do. The first plan is for me to be an aspiring rabbi, but if that don't work out, I got to go to the backup plan. And Peter, in Luke chapter 5, is living in a backup plan. The only reason he's fishing, the only reason he's cleaning nets, the only reason he has to work all night is because what he really wanted wasn't able to happen. What he had dreamed of since the time he could dream was not possible for him anymore. So he thought. And then Jesus comes along and looks at him. And doesn't just make up for a lost night's work, but Jesus actually restores the dream that Simon thought was dead and gone. If Simon thought this dream was still a possibility, he would have been at the temple. He would have been in the synagogue. He would have been studying and memorizing and navigating the scrolls. The only problem is he thought all that was done. So what I'll do is I'll just go fish. And if the best I can do is just sort of navigate the boat, I'll navigate the boat. If that's what you need, that's what you need. Because I probably don't have anything to offer you. I wonder how many people right now have settled for what is because you stopped believing Jesus can. I wonder how many of you are living in a backup plan. You're living in a state that was never intended to be your reality, but you've allowed it to become your reality simply because you thought that what God said he has for you, he doesn't have for you. God says he can heal, but you're like, he can't heal that. God says he can forgive, and you're like, he ain't gonna forgive that. God says he can provide, but I don't think he's gonna provide for me. He won't provide for other people. He ain't gonna provide for me. I wonder how many people are literally living in a backup plan, operating in a backup plan, calling it normal, saying this is my life. This is just the way it has to be. When God actually has something far greater for you. But I'm just going to choose to live in my backup plan. I came to tell you that the God we serve has the power to heal, and he has the power to forgive, and he has the power to love, and he has the power to change, and he has the power to provide, and he has the power to do exceedingly abundantly far more than we could ever ask or imagine through his power at work through us. But maybe the reason we haven't experienced the restoration that's available to us is because we have no idea who it is, this Jesus, that makes it available to us. Because Peter didn't at the beginning. Before the miracle with the fish, when Peter sort of sarcastically replies to Jesus, it's like, come on, balls, man. We've been fishing all night and we ain't caught nothing. In that phrase, Peter uses a general term to call Jesus something. And it's not necessarily derogatory, but the implication is very unique. He uses a Greek word, and in the translation we read, it's translated master. But what it means is that Peter is saying, I recognize your authority on this subject. Peter calls Jesus master. And essentially what he's saying is he's saying, Jesus, I understand that when it comes to the scriptures, when it comes to God, like you certainly, I mean, my mother-in-law ain't got a fever no more. She was about to die, now she ain't gonna die. Like, I understand your leadership, your authority on this subject, which is where many of us are. Some of us, we think that the only place that Jesus can speak to our lives is on the matters of faith, on the matters of eternity, and not today. We recognize his authority on the subject. But then after seeing this miracle, and 2 boats are about to sink, the scripture says that Peter, Simon, he falls to his knees, and he uses a word when he calls Jesus not by his name, but by his title. And the way it gets translated after he says, I'm a sinner, is he calls him Lord, which means that I recognize your authority over my life. Which is an entirely different thing than saying, Jesus, I recognize that you have authority to speak on these matters. Peter is saying, Jesus, I recognize you have authority to speak over me. That who I am and who I'll become are who you say I am and who you say I can become. At your word I will. Because you said, do it. I will do it. Can I tell you something today? You're never gonna know Jesus like you could until you trust him like you should. You're never gonna know Jesus like you could until you trust him with every area of your life. Because he can restore anything. Even those dreams on the inside of you that you had buried a long time ago and you thought there is no way this is ever gonna be true of me. I'm never gonna know what it's like to be loved. I'm never gonna know what it's like to be accepted. I'm never gonna know what it's like to feel valuable. I'm never gonna know what it's like to be able to be generous. I'm never gonna know what it's like to make it. I'm never gonna know until you trust Jesus like you should. You're never gonna know him like you could. And I believe what the Spirit of God wants to restore to you today is everything. 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 Some of you, your faith feels shriveled up and dead, and it's not a new thing. You come to church some, and you try to read the Bible some, and you try to pray some, but you feel like it's deeper than that. By the Spirit of God and the power of God, I believe that restoration is available for you. Some of you feel like you are so disconnected and so estranged from your family. There's no way that God could ever mend that and heal that and water that so it's connected again. And I'm here to tell you that God can restore anything. Those things that you thought were never possible, he can do it. He can do it. If you can find within you enough faith to respond to his call that at your word I will. Jesus, because you say so, I'll do it. I'll forgive. I'll love. I'll serve. I'll try. I'll pray. I'll invite. I'll give. I'll leverage. I'll talk. I'll work. Because you said so, I will. And as you do it, I believe that you're going to experience peace like you've never known before, purpose like you've never seen, validation, sanity, joy like you've never known before. Because God can restore anything. If you'll have the faith to do what he says do, even though you've got every excuse in the world, even though you've got every reason possible not to, but at his word, you will.